Thinking about self-publishing and don't know where to start? Join the Spa Girls each week for 30 minutes of honest advice, tips and resources. I'm Trudy J and I am here with Wendy Valor.
Hello.
Cheryl Phipps.
Hi there.
And Shah Barrett.
Good morning. Good
afternoon.
Morning. Good evening, depending.
Whatever it is.
Wherever you are.
Before we start, I just want to show everyone the pen my grandchildren gave me so that I had in my office that has really weird eyes.
Ah.
Hey, they just gave it to me the other day and they were like,
you pointed out that
that's
those
for
were
you,
eyes,
Nana.
Wendy.
Those, Shah, it's a typical one of you. Yeah.
So, back to the topic at hand. If anyone has just listened to the audio, Wendy just showed up this weird looking little koala pen with googly eyes.
That she squeezed in the middle to make the eyes pop out.
Yeah,
it
was exciting. It was very exciting stuff.
I had one of those before and I lost it, and then they paired up with that one. So I've got.
Where did they get it from? It's a koala bear. You wouldn't get it in New Zealand. They haven't been
so
anywhere.
It was probably bought to them by their grandparents when they went to Australia, and they decided to re-gift it to their nana.
Regifting. That's great.
Yeah. This is at a point when we were allowed to travel overseas, and
yeah, exactly.
Alrighty, let's get on to the topic at hand.
Right.
So, we just wanted to talk today about traditional publishing versus self-publishing, and we had a reader question. So. Shall I read out the quick question?
Read out the question and then reader for the submitting reader, a listener question as opposed to a reader question. Or, read out the question. It was good.
So we had someone asking us, knowing what you all do, if you could start all over again, would you still start with the tradition? Sorry, I'm reading it with the traditional route, or would you go straight to self-publishing? So it's an interesting question, because we did all actually, 4 of us, have all tried to get agents, have all tried to go the traditional publishing route. And it's interesting to think about what we might do today if we were starting out. But it's actually a really hard question, because I'm not starting out and I know what I know and I know.
Yeah.
But if you took yourself back, Trudel, starting with you to the beginning, and you had your first book and it was polished like a brand new penny, what would you do? What would you do with it? In this world we're in, that's the difference. You see, we started in a traditional publishing world, so self-publishing was off the table for us. That was like a foreign frontier. But now these guys are coming in with all of this knowledge that's out there. What would you do? Well,
see, from my current head of I know what I know now, I would self-publish straight away. I wouldn't even bother going to traditional. But I don't know, maybe that's different. Maybe beginner me wouldn't know everything that I know, and maybe beginner me would still be tempted to look into traditional. I don't know. This is
I don't think it's a question we can answer. We can only say from our own experience why we did what we did. And I think one of the things that we were talking about earlier was the fact that we are pretty sure we would not be published. We certainly would not have as many books as we do have out there if we had all waited for that phone call.
Well, I mean,
we wouldn't be working full time. Wouldn't be working full time. No,
wouldn't be earning enough money to actually work full time.
That's the crux of it for me. I would not have been earning enough money from traditional publishing, even if I had out half as many books as what I.
Right, and I mean, having had the call, and danced around the room and got flowers and wine from people and had a celebratory party. I was there. Yeah, you were. And so was Trudy and Shah. But the thing about it is, now I look back on that time and I think that was everything for me. That was what, coming from the time where self-publishing wasn't prevalent. Now, like it was like, I'm there, this is it, I've made the big time, and I had planned my millions spent, rah, rah, rah. But the problem with that was when the second book didn't get, I was out in the cold, I had nothing, I didn't know what to do, I didn't know where to go, I'd pinned all my hopes. I had an agent, American agent, I was with Random House, I was just like, I don't understand, why don't you want my second book?
And if we dissect it a little, that second book, that's probably your worst earning book out of all your books, in terms of how much you've earned from it, one of?
The one they've published, the traditional
the first one.
That's the one you got the least amount of money from.
It's a piece of crap, I'm not going to lie. I read it the other day.
Let's not beat about the bush here.
I read it the other day and I'm like, is there any way I can take my name off that?
Yeah.
No,
I'm sure
but then, and isn't that something right there that I can go back and rework those self-published books that within the same year I self-published my first book, thanks to you guys, and I can rework them. And I can recover them.
Context, that was January 2013, so
and
over
7 years ago.
And just balancing the income on both of those books, one I can advertise, one I can recover, one I can reblurb, one I can do whatever I like with, and it's you can't compare them. The income between those two books, it's nothing.
Just the fact in that second book and ongoing, that you can then advertise all future books, which you cannot do with that first one. That is huge. I can't even equate that to how much that impacts on your business, because it's huge.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not saying it's not hard. I was incredibly lucky. I had a really good break with the traditional publishing, which gave me an audience to start with, and when I became into self-publishing, I hit self-publishing when it was just starting to ride that crest. So I put a book up and bang, it went well. And it's hard. It's a really hard game, but I would never step back from self-publishing now. I wouldn't be working from home.
And also the fact that when we first started writing, and believe me, we were writing for many years, well, most of us were, before we published our first book. Self-publishing was actually a dirty word. And now it's not. And I mean, you've only got to see how many people are doing so well. More people are doing well from self-publishing than there are in traditional publishing. And when I say well, I'm talking about earning a decent living as your main job.
Yeah.
So what are the benefits of self-publishing then?
Well, I want to stop because we've jumped ahead.
We've veered. Sorry, Trudy.
I know, you people with your jumping ahead.
Yeah.
I just wanted to do a really quick definition of self-publishing versus traditional. I found this from a website called scribewriting.com, and I thought it was actually really interesting. I mean, it's really basic. It's not, it's not breaking any.
Well, how about you give it to us then?
Yes, that's a good idea. I should stop talking, just read it out.
Yeah.
So if the author owns the rights and the royalties, then the book is self-published. If the publishing company owns the rights and royalties, then the book is traditionally published. That's it. Everything else is commentary on that single distinction. So if you've sold your rights, you still own the copyright, but if you've sold the license or the distribution rights to a traditional publisher, then that is traditional publishing, versus if you do it all yourself, then you are self-published. The other interesting thing that I just wanted to mention about that too was that when you sell those rights to a publishing company, they have the right to change your writing in any way, shape, and form that they want to. And a lot of people talk about that as in a really positive way, like, yay, they helped me make my book better, which is amazing and fantastic. But if there are changes that they want you to make and you don't want to make, they have the right to make them, to force you to make them. You don't have that control because you have given it to them. So to me, as a control freak, that just gets my goat a little. But anyway, so that's, I'm trying to be neutral.
They change your title.
I mean,
can change the way, everything. They can tell you what to write too if you're contracted to them. They'll give you and that was one of the things that got me most of all about why my second book wasn't published by traditionally, was because it didn't fit the tropes at the time. End of story. She said it was a great book, but it didn't fit the tropes, and I'm just like, what?
Because they are very strict about, I mean, they are making, their business is to make money, right? So if they have certain tropes that they know will sell, you can understand it, right? I mean, it's the same as thing that we do when we're trying to get our books to sell in self-publishing. It's like, I get that totally. It's just really hard when you're the person being told that as an author, knowing that you've got this great book and it's being turned down.
Best book ever written.
Best book ever written, ever.
Every time.
All right, so let's talk about, well, I mean, I feel like we should talk about the pros and cons of self-publishing and the pros and cons of traditional. Can we do that with kind of a level of not, I don't know, I feel like we're going to be biased towards self-publishing every day of the week, but
well, I kind of feel that we have to be, because that's what we do. You know what I mean? It's not like we can say, well, I don't wish to be traditionally published. If something happened and it, by some miracle, somebody contacted me and said, look, I'm going to give you $1 gazillion for your next book, whatever you choose to write, I'd be in boots and all. Absolutely.
That's the thing. I think we tend to approach things warts and all, and so we don't have a romantic view of it. And I think often when we start out, and ourselves included, there tends to be a romantic view of the whole what is it, the rose-coloured glasses. So we've been around long enough not to have that on either level.
and we know plenty of traditional published authors, and so we do have that to look at and compare in a purely professional way. The long-term gains from traditional publishing and the long-term gains from self-publishing, and so we know firsthand what they are for self-publishing.
All right, so let's do it. What are the benefits of being traditionally published?
So I think one of the things that's very hard to put into kind of a container, but it is very much that kind of internal drive, if you like. And for some writers, there is a strong sense of validation, or that's the dream, and I think that's really hard to quantify because it's a different strength in different people, but that is an aspect of it, and
the feeling that someone external is saying that your book is amazing.
It's a big thing, and that dream about seeing your book on the
bookshelves
one day in the future on the airport bookshelves kind of thing. It's that kind of the next Lee Child or the next Nora Roberts for a lot of, and I'm not taking the mickey here at all. Like for some people, that's very much, and so that's something that you can't quantify because it's in different people. So
I would love to be the next Nora Roberts. To be fair, I mean, although she writes a billion words a day. I was going to say she doesn't write your genre either. So that's completely irrelevant.
Isn't it? It's a mind shift.
But also, okay, so that's so validation. I also think that there are different audiences with traditional publishing. So as self-publishers, we get Amazon and we get the other, Kobo and the other platforms, and there's certain people who read these books. But there are actually a certain audience of people who won't read anything but, say, a physical book through a bookstore, and you're not going to get access to those people via self-publishing. And so maybe even just the thought that it's a different audience of people that you might get access to if you traditionally publish, maybe as well as.
I think it's that old bricks and mortar store. I mean, just a kind of a disclaimer to that is that is opening up to self-publishers as well.
Yes.
So it's not a firm line in the sand there, but the reality is that now in 2020 there's far less brick and mortar stores than there were in 2013.
Okay, we're talking about the benefits here, man. We're going to stay with the benefits.
I'm really trying. I'm trying.
I'd like to say it would be nice when you're starting out to not have to look for an editor. I think that's a plus for traditional publishing, because they have theirs all on tap. So
a cover designer.
Yeah. So you're not financially paying.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So you're not having that upfront cost. So and it is all being taken care of for you. So you you leave the editing, the cover
part is
that's all. Yeah. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. It's all being done for you. So
and ideally you have a check in advance on the sale of that book that you then earn out in
money
royalties.
up front.
I just want to kind of also put a little rider, and we're talking about traditional publishers that pay in advance here. We're not talking about digital only or digital no advance publishers. I genuinely don't see that there is any point in this day and age going to those people. So we're talking the top, what used to be the big five, it's probably now the big three, not knowing how they all kind of buy each other out.
Yeah.
But that's what we're talking about, that level. We're not talking about the small outfits, because honestly, I just do not see any benefit in going to those whatsoever.
No.
Yeah. And there's a myth around this. The next bit that I'm going to say is that the traditional publishing house will do all the marketing for you, and they might do marketing for Nora, and they might do all the marketing for Lee Child, but they will not do the marketing for a newbie author who's one of however many newbie authors, and they won't.
They might make you some bookmarks. They might, but it's minimal. They certainly will not be doing your social media.
No.
No. And they will make you, are we on negatives or positives here? Just quietly.
We're on positives. We're trying to, very hard, attempting to talk about the benefits of traditional self-publishing.
From my experience, they sent me on a massive blog tour, and that was huge. I went to so many blog sites, and they flashed me around everywhere. So that was really cool for me. And that gave me a leg up that as a newbie author I would never have got, probably self-publishing. Right, so that there are positives depending on who you go with and what sort of professional outfit they are.
They definitely have their networks, right? The people that they know, absolutely. And they're regular who will help out in terms of that kind of thing. So that's cool.
There's some really good people. I'm not talking the owners of these publishing companies, but I'm talking the people that actually work at the coalface of publishing. Are book loving people, and I mean we've met a lot of them through different conferences, and I'm sure that whoever's listening has done the same, and they are genuinely good people. And
also I met some really nice big authors, who promoted my books and that sort of side of it. So there was that side of it as well. I mean, you're in with if you're in a good house, you're in with a band of some pretty top-notch players who quite often they'll put a comment in front of your book or something like that. So there's those added benefits as well. There's pluses and minuses, I'm sure.
Yes.
We're getting to them.
Can we talk about the negatives now?
Oh, thank God.
I think we need to.
Well, I think the first obvious negative is that you're not actually in control of this choice in many ways. It is still a crapshoot whether you'll get picked up or not. It is still very much a crapshoot. And so for I would say a lot of people, there isn't a choice. You could spend the next 5 years trying to get yourself an agent by going onto Twitter and doing pitch wars or whatever, and then there's still no guarantee that you're going to sell a book or books. You're certainly not going to be retiring on one book unless you're, some random sparkling diamond out of like it's the reality is that the advances are modest, and you'll still be working your day job, but even to get to that point is still really hard, and it's a very lengthy process. It can take years and years and years. So I think the first thing is it's not always a choice. It is often a
and even if you get picked up for one book, doesn't mean you're going to get the second book. And even if you get picked up for the second book, it doesn't mean
koala.
Look
at her.
Yeah. I mean, she's just lucky she had us to force her to do self-publishing, where she'd still be trying. I don't know what she'd be doing.
And that actually leads on to the fact that when you self-publish, you can put as many books up a year as you can write.
Yes.
And traditionally published, they might take one book and they might even pick up the second book, but that second book might not even go up for a year, 18 months, maybe even longer. So
exactly longer.
Funnily enough, I think if you self-publish and do quite well, you would have a better shot at traditionally publishing. And because you have
the irony.
The irony. I got approached by my editor to write for them again. Sort of a couple of years later.
Because money talks, sales talk, and by that stage you've done the heavy lifting, and also by that stage you think, well, why would I? Because if I'm at this successful that you want me, you're not gonna. And I mean, you hear the stories, but
taking the emotion out of it.
I think you have to put your business hat on.
But I mean, the other quickly, I'm going to make this point quickly and then we'll keep going, is that it is essentially the choice of the person. And if you feel that you want to do traditional publishing, we would never say, no, don't do that. You should definitely do self-publishing, because it is very much an individual choice. And if you see positives in the traditional publishing world, then you go
and
for it.
And also just in general, there are still some genres that are very much better suited to traditional. Like I think it's quite hard to make a go of children's books and self-publishing, particularly picture books, things that require a special kind of printing. In that case, I think it's really tough. Memoir is quite tricky, I think, as well to do. And, poetry, I'm thinking sort of there's some kind of more specialist things. Your coffee table books, that kind of thing is... But if we're talking genre writers, then
But I don't think poetry books ever are big sellers. Like, even if you were traditionally publishing a poetry book, it's never going to be a big seller. So,
well, it is a niche, isn't it?
It's a very small niche. So yeah. Anyway, so
good on you if you do. That's great.
For me, I mean, the negatives of, for example, so you say the traditional publishing house will do all the editing for me and they will do the covers for me and all that kind of thing. What if they do an ugly cover? What if they do a cover that's missed the point? Yeah, and you hear the stories, right? And sometimes they hit the point and sometimes they don't. And you have no say in that. And the same with the editing. Sometimes you get some crazy little 21-year-old who's just got her English degree and has just been hired by this publishing house and thinks that she wants to change the whole story to be how she thinks it should be, and you're an experienced author. You know, like, there's just these stories that you hear of terrible situations, or when you're acquired by one editor and that editor leaves, and then suddenly you're with another editor and that editor doesn't like your book as much, you know, all this kind of stuff. And you've got nowhere to go, right? Like,
the common theme here is no control.
I was just going to say, it all boils down to that for most of us, I think, who are self-publishing. The fact that we can hire an editor, they can do an okay job, or we can look around for another one who'll do a better job, or we find the perfect one and who edits all our books, you know. And the same with your covers.
And I think the thing about it now is there's just so much information out there. When we first started, there wasn't that huge, vault of information at our fingertips. So if you want to self-publish now, really, you just have to get online and do some really good searching, and you'll find some people who will recommend editors. You'll find some people who will tell you how to self-publish. You'll find some point of fact, this podcast with all the things we've gone through over the years. We didn't have that. And I think now perhaps that's why more and more you're seeing some of these traditional published people coming across to self-publishing, because they're understanding. And again, you can be a hybrid, of course, like I am. Sort of a hybrid, but you know what I mean.
I mean, you hear stories like, it used to be, you talk about traditional coming across to self-publishing. I mean, it used to be, if you got dropped by a traditional publishing house, your only option was to try another one maybe, or try and write a different book, whereas now there's this other option. You can come over to self-publishing, put that book out. And you also hear a lot of stories where, like, for example, Wendy's second book was rejected by the traditional publisher. They said, oh no, it's not the right trope or whatever. And that book was just sold like hotcakes on Amazon. I remember that was for a long time your best-selling book. I don't know if it still is, but and it's just, it was for a long time. And it just, that kind of thing where just because it's been rejected, or just because someone at a traditionally publishing house says no, they could be saying no for, not because it's a terrible book, it could be because of market reasons, it
could be anything,
small genre that
we've already. Exactly.
Yeah. Like, I heard a woman who was went to a traditional publishing house, and she put her book across. And then she got this lovely letter of rejection saying, "Oh, we love your book, but it's too similar to another book that we're just about to put out. So I'm sorry, we're saying no." And she took that as a rejection of her book and never wrote again. And she told me this just recently. And I was like, oh my God, that is an amazing rejection. You should have been pumping that book out to every man and his dog. And, but she stopped writing because of that.
Yeah. If everybody in the world who was writing said, there's another book that is similar to mine, stopped writing, there would be like a fraction of writers out there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Just going back to the control thing, I think too, that's also what can be so overwhelming about the thought of self-publishing, is because you are in control and you have a lot of decisions to make. And I think for a lot of us, having to make a raft of decisions is very overwhelming, particularly when you start out. So I totally get that. I really understand that. And I guess my advice to that would be is to join in with other writers going on the same journey, because I think, like, for us, we all learn different aspects and helped each other. And you can do it online or you can do it in person, but that's a help. You don't have to kind of bear the load yourself,
I also think part of that overwhelm is that we all think that there's a right decision that can be made. And I think what the really big positive with self-publishing, I think, is that even if you make the wrong, quote marks, decision to begin with, you'll learn as you go, and then you can just change it and make the right decision. I mean, we learned that. So I used to feel like you had a cover, and that was your cover, and then you had a price, and that was your price. And then we went to RAM last year, Romance Author Mastermind, and listened to Laurel and Paige talk, and she was like, "Oh no, I've had 8 covers on this book, and I raise the price or I lower the price depending on the audience that I'm after." I was like, "What? There's different audiences at different price, and it had always felt like, no, this is the one way to do it, and this is the only way that you're going to be successful. And what that taught me was there are so many ways to be successful, and it's just a matter of making the decisions and moving forward and learning from the decisions that you have made, and kind of iterating and changing and
tweaking
and enjoying. There's that, I'm going to say that word again that I can't say, anonymity. Enjoy anonymity. I can't say that word, can't say it at all. So it's great to be anonymous. No, banana's the same. I just think, being anonymous when you very first start is to your benefit, because you're testing the waters, you're testing blurbs, you're testing covers, you're testing how things work, you're finding your way. And that's a great thing, because really no one knows you're there until you start making some traction. And then by then you should have it should be set, you should understand what you're doing. The great thing about self-publishing is you can make mistakes when you first start. And you can adjust
you can
and
make mistakes when you're down the track too. I don't
exactly. But what I'm saying is, being anonymous, don't be scared, because you are anonymous, and chances are your mother, father, sister twice removed, second cousin are going to buy your books, but no one else to start with. You know what I mean? Until you start advertising and get yourself more books out there. So being anonymous helps with that.
I think also, though, that puts some people off as well, because they're just, you see all these thousands of new books come on, the bookshelves, the digital bookshelves every week, and you're like, how am I even going to be found? So I think there's a perception that being traditionally published will give you a kind of a leg up on that. That's kind of my feeling of it.
And maybe that's true. Maybe that initially traditional publishing does have a little bit of advantage in that way, because they have their markets, they have their distribution channels, and they will get your book out there. But then as you gain traction as a self-publisher, it might take a little bit longer, and you figure it out, then you will surpass that and go way past it. So maybe that's a really good point that I've never thought about before.
It's a little tiny booster rocket initially. It probably is a little bit like that, depending on who you go with. Again, all of this is very dependent on who you go with, but it soon fizzles out. Trust me.
But there are also those readers out there who will say, I only read traditional published books. And I've come across them, and I remember giving one to a lady, a book, and she said, "Oh, is this traditionally published?" And I'm like, "No, I'd self-published." And she read, "So it looks traditionally published." The thing is that those lines are blurring now. Those lines are blurring now, but there are those readers who will only read something from Random House, or will only read something from Kensington.
I don't think there's that as they will maybe think, oh, okay, traditional published. But before I knew anything about print. Print versus ebooks. Before I became a writer and learned about publishing and stuff, I wouldn't have known who published all the books on my shelves. I didn't care. It was about the author and the story and the genre to me. So maybe there's a percentage of people who are aware that Kensington publishes a certain type, but I think the majority of readers don't actually pay attention to that.
Maybe it's print. I think
it's probably the print readership. And also, to be fair, when self-publishing first kind of started coming out, really before the Kindle days, back in those days, it was kind of a weird, cover that people put on, made in Word or Paint, Microsoft Paint, and it was kind of cringy often.
You do still see them. I do still the cringy covers out there, and the people who are.
But now we're talking self-publishers have access, as Cheryl said before, to editors that have come from that traditional world, because they're being retrenched a lot, so they're also going out, effectively.
They need the work,
hanging their shingle out. same with cover designers and things like that. And I just wanted to point something out too. This is a kind of an evolving market, and when Wendy started self-publishing, she was the first one of us to kind of put a book out there in 2013. And in those days, as out of being non-Americans, we couldn't do audiobooks because you had to be ACX and blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. And things have evolved now to the point where anybody can do an audiobook through Findaway Voices. We've got access to those. We've got access to translators and print and all of those things, and it's a constantly evolving thing. So there's more and more opportunities to put your book into different formats that probably traditional offered before that self-publishers couldn't access. So the decision making is also different in 2020 than it was, say, in 2015 even, and it will be different in 2025 again. I would say that probably the last hold would be the ability to sell foreign rights, as in getting books out in foreign markets and that kind of thing. And a lot of people will go traditionally published. They see that as an advantage because often those agents, publishers or their agents have foreign rights, and so, and that can be a whole number of different income streams. But again, I think I can see that very much changing as well. There's a lot of the bigger self-publishers are doing their own translations and that kind of thing. Or they're selling their foreign rights. They're keeping the English and they're selling the foreign rights. So there's always ways around things, or different ways to access different markets. So I guess what I'm saying is it's still an evolving. It's a matured field, but it's still evolving. Yeah.
And I have to say, it's kind of a little bit off topic really, but I to be honest, I do like to get my books printed. And just having my book, holding it in my hand like that makes me proud enough, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like not being traditionally published isn't the worst thing in the world, and being self-published is actually a really fine thing. So I can have a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and you can also get into libraries. That's another thing. You can get into libraries.
I think self-published is amazing. Not just fine. I think it's amazing. I think it's a brilliant thing we're able to do here. And if someone came to me now, unless it was, never say never, but unless they offered me a large sum of money, I wouldn't go traditional. I don't see the benefit. All my effort.
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't give up my ebook rights anyway.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. You never say never, but
and you could do it that way, Wendy. So but
so I wanted to talk about the us versus them mentality too. That's a little bit there. Like I went to an event the other week and it was traditional, and I mentioned to one person that I was self-published, and I immediately got that look in their eye, and I was like, I don't know whether it was my chip on my shoulder, but I just immediately felt a little bit of a step away, a little bit of a frosting over of the excitement. And I do think that and I think partially maybe traditional publishing looking at self-publishing feels threatened. They feel, and there's that stigma attached to it. The books are not as good. And maybe they used to be not as good, and maybe some of the ones that get put out now are not as good, but the best of the best self-publishers are amazing. Like I read pretty much mostly self-published books these days, and they are, no, actually that's a lie, because I read traditionally published ones too, but the books that are the best of self-publishing hold up right next to the traditionally published ones.
They do.
And there's no difference. But then I think also self-publishers look at traditional publishing, and so maybe there's a little bit of a little bit of a twinge, like back in the day when you wanted to be traditionally published, and maybe you feel a bit sad or a little bit rejected that you didn't get traditionally published or didn't get accepted, and maybe that's why you're a little bit angry and resentful at them and you say mean things about them now. I don't know.
Maybe there's a view that traditional publishing actually can be equated to vanity publishing. I've seen that one as well.
Yeah. So there's all sorts of reasons, and it just creates a little bit of tension between self-publishing and traditional. And I think things are changing, as Shah said before, and it makes it, when you're the established, you're the incumbent, like traditional publishing, the idea that self-publishing is coming along and eating away at something, the way things have always been, that can be kind of uncomfortable too. But I honestly think, there's a place for both. I don't see why it has to be us versus them, and I think people can choose whichever way they want to go, and I don't think it's a big deal. But
I think the line is blurring as more and more, particularly in romance, more and more like the mid-list, what they call the mid-list traditional authors aren't making money, and they're coming over to self-publishing, or they're doing both. You know, there's an awful lot of pen names that are self-published that might have a traditional contract or two on the side as well. You know, it's I think it is. I think, as always, romance has led the field.
Of course it has.
And so to see the future, look at the romance genre, even if you're not writing in it. I think it's the longest established in self-publishing in terms of success and the professionalism in which the writers approach it. And leave it to the ladies. Just saying.
Leave it to the ladies.
Leave it to the ladies.
So have we got anything else?
Again, it's me. Sorry about my internet today. People coming in and out non-stop. Sorry.
No one would have noticed if you hadn't said anything, Wendy.
Oh well. Just the fact that I was there and then I was gone. I thought, haha. Actually, hail and thunder. So that's why.
Really?
Crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I just want to go back to just a little point that we kind of touched on at the beginning, but I think one of the ways to answer the question, which what should I do, requires quite a little bit of internal kind of thinking or mulling over, is what your definition of success is for you at this moment. And it might be getting picked up by Harlequin for, the next 5 years kind of thing. And that's okay. We're not judging you for that, but just know why you're doing it, I guess, and how you define it as success, and know that there isn't a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and that there's hard work on both sides.
And there is no pot of gold necessarily at the end of the self-publishing rainbow either. And that's the other thing, like people jump into it and expect to get lots of money straight away and then get disappointed when it doesn't happen and then cancel out. And I think either way, traditional self-publishing, it's a long sort of thing. I think
it's a long game.
I think the key here is, do you want to wait? Do you want to wait for somebody to knock on your door, or do you want to just have a book out there? That might be a deciding factor.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, we would advise, like, so if you're considering self-publishing, don't just bung any old thing up there. We want you to be putting out, go to an amazing cover designer who's going to get you the best cover for your genre that you can possibly get. And we want you to go to an editor who's going to help you with that book. And especially if you're a first-time author, and maybe, maybe a developmental editor who's going to help you shape it and make it into the best book it could possibly be. We're not saying bung any old thing up there and hope for the best. We're saying there's a process, and we've talked about it many times, of the best way to go about all these things. And if you do all of that and continue on and keep working hard and keep doing the things that you need to do, then self-publishing can be an amazing career.
It is. You got to do the hard yards to get the success, and that's the truth of the matter. I mean, we're quite a few years down, us lot. And it's it's taken us a while to grow, and we've had exposure to some of the best in the business. So you need to really dig in. You need to make sure your book is the absolute best it can be. You need to make sure that your cover meets the criteria for the genre you're in. You need to make sure your blurb is a kick-ass blurb. So all of these little all these little boxes. And then when you self-publish, you give yourself the best opportunity you can. But don't just throw it up there and hope it's going to sell.
Treat it like a job. And like every job, you try and do your best.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the thing is, look at it like an apprenticeship. Like we've done our time. The four of us have done our time. We've done the hard yards. We've worked very hard at what we do. We've learned and learned and learned. And our skill set now is quite vast, but it's because we did our time. We've done our apprenticeship. We've understood what we're doing, and we know this business. And that's something, it's an evolving thing, and it changes all the time. But if you're starting out, take small steps and learn your business, learning slowly what you are, what it is, and how it works. Don't just think you're going to get in there and carve out a success,
Is that, and I think when you talk about that, I think maybe that's part of the appeal of traditional publishing, is all I have to do is hand them my book, And if they see a spark or something in there, then they will help me through that process.
But
they will handhold me through it. They will find the editor. They'll find they'll tell me what's
that
good
side
and what's
of it,
bad.
sure.
But I'm just saying that, like, this, and so that must be quite appealing to someone who's a newbie author, and you're just thinking, we're telling them, oh, it's a long journey, and you've got to figure it out, and you've got to learn all this stuff, and then you say, oh, but if I hand it over to traditional publishers, they will do all of that.
Still, they will give it back to you with corrections, and that could happen several times. So it's not like, here's my book, I'm done. It doesn't work like that either.
No, but also when the book is published, they stop. Sure, you've got their name backing you, and I was with a big house, Random House, you know, and you've got them backing you, but if you don't hit the ground running and sell, they'll just like, you're out, mate. You know, like. And
but also they are really big on the launches, and then it peters off. Whereas self-publishing is, you can keep going and keep advertising and keep pushing your books for a very long time to come, and that's a big benefit of that to me, I think. And I think even when you go with traditional and you think, oh, they'll take care of all these things for me, and I won't have to learn it in the same way, you still do have to learn it, and you still are doing an apprenticeship, and you're going to be getting better as a writer and learning more as a writer, and you're going to learn you're going to have to learn things about how to market, and you know, the ones that do succeed are the ones who figure out the marketing side of things and manage to push their books out there and get the readers to read them. So it's
a journey.
Everything takes time. You just have to
learning.
Be a bit
Don't
patient.
be overawed by it. Just take, you know, little steps. It's about little steps, little learnings, little key changes, you know, you put a book up and it's not selling. Okay, well, why not? Maybe my cover's not right. Change that. You know what I mean? And it's all to do with it. The thing about self-publishing, you spend as much as you have. You know, and I think you have to be very mindful of that. You know, don't go into it and use all your money up and all your savings up, and you know, and that sort of thing. Leave your day job even though you haven't published a book, you know, that sort of thing. I think you've got to be very mindful of those things as well. But
but that's another story as well.
For another day.
So I think at the end of it, we can all say we would still be self-publishing. We still believe in self-publishing over traditional publishing. We think it's the best way forward for us personally, and for anyone who wants to talk to us about it. But it is a very personal decision, and we would never, you know, not to say that some people might not traditional publish and do really great, but we believe in self-publishing. We think it's an amazing place to be. We think it's the environment is cool, the opportunities are amazing, the ability to put our books up here. It's a great time to be a writer, as Mark Dawson always says. You know, those are true. And we firmly believe that. So that's where we are. I think that's another episode. It was a bit rambly and a bit sort of all over the show, but I think we got our point across.
That's the point of self-publishing versus traditional. It is. There's no one shoe fits all, you know. Really. But it's wonderful. And we're more than happy to talk to you about anything you want to ask.
Exactly. So yes, thank you again for joining us for another episode of the Spa Girls podcast. Where can we be found, Shah? Oh, no.
SpaGirlsPodcast.com.
At SpaGirlsPodcast.com.
And Wendy?
We've had technical issues today. Technical issues.
Anyway, thank you all for joining us.
See
and we'll be back again next week. See you.
Bye.
Bye.